Once upon a time, two friends joined forces to bring you the best in horror entertainment. Brian from the north, Tim from the south, each bringing their own unique perspective to the horror community. Movie reviews, Blu-ray releases, beer pairings, games, and more. Welcome to your new home for horror. This is Civil Gore.
Hey there, everybody. Welcome to episode 147 of the Civil Gore Podcast. I am your host, Tim.
And this is Brian, and we have another really fun. I think it's like the stream of guests that we've had on in these last bunch of episodes have been unprecedented, don't you think, Tim?
Yes, it has been insanely good interviews with some insanely cool guests, and we've been very, very fortunate to get these people on. And I hope you guys are enjoying those as much as we have enjoyed making them, because it's just been a real treat for the show to get this caliber of guests on and to have them talk about such interesting and cool topics that I know you guys are excited about.
Yeah, and we have some more lined up too, but this week we like to we have a little bit of a gaming themed episode again. We know Tim and I are big. We love video games. We love our board games. We know a lot of our listeners are into that too. So this time, though, instead of going to board games as much, we went to more video games. And this week we have on the very popular and you'll hear in the interview where we call her an expert, but she has a better term for herself. But anyway, it's I'm sure you've seen her on Twitch. She hosts the Dungeon Rundown. She has done, I mean, how many things really? We look through. I mean, she's on Twitch a lot, and it's Trisha Hershberger. So we reached out to her hoping she'd come on. We wanted to talk about some horror video games, and we got that and some more. So it was really great.
Yeah, she's a fantastic guest. You could tell she's a absolute pro at interviews. She made Brian and I's job very easy.
Oh my God!
I told Brian before the show I didn't even have to edit the thing. She just completely professional. So you guys are really, really going to enjoy that interview, and we're going to have it right after our first chop. Okay, Brian, so the Hammer Horror Project continues. Unfortunately, I had to rent this film, even though I own it on DVD, because the DVD was packed up somewhere.
Oh, no.
Oh, well.
This move has destroyed your ease of anything
really,
for the podcast.
It has just been a nightmare. Well, this one was a treat to watch. I did not mind spending the money. This was Revenge of Frankenstein from 1958. This is the follow-up to Curse of Frankenstein, which we covered a couple episodes back. And again, stars Peter Cushing as Victor Frankenstein. Now, the neat thing about this sequel is that it is a true sequel. It takes place almost immediately. I say immediately. It's really 3 years after the events of Curse of Frankenstein, but the story flows immediately into this sequel. As you recall, at the end of Curse of Frankenstein, Victor Frankenstein was in prison, and he was telling his tale. In this one, he's about to be executed by guillotine, and he's marched out. And we see the guillotine fall, and we think that's the end of him. But come to find out, he enlisted the aid of a hunchback, not named Igor, though, named Carl. And this guy looks exactly like Tom York from Radiohead, the lead singer of Radiohead.
Oh my
It's
God.
really strange. But Carl the hunchback has assisted him in escaping the guillotine. They kind of gloss over exactly how he gets out of this, but they instead behead the body of a dead priest and put it in Victor Frankenstein's grave so that everybody thinks he was truly executed. Then he goes off to live the life of a village doctor named Dr. Stein. So this is
very clever there.
This is the one really. There's one flaw in this whole movie. This movie is awesome, but that is the one flaw in this movie. I was like, why could he have not thought of a better alias? So Dr. Stein is doing very well in this village until one clever young man sees through the ruse and the alias and confronts him about it, and basically blackmails Dr. Frankenstein into allowing this man to become his assistant. So he starts assisting Dr. Frankenstein in his new experiments. Now, this movie is really interesting because instead of trying to resurrect a dead body like he did in the first film, he decides the reason that his creation turned monstrous is because the brain was damaged. So he is going to take a living brain and implant it into a dead body. And the living brain he wants to implant is Carl's, because Carl, the hunchback, is so deformed he wants a new body, so he's volunteering for this. So that's what he does. He
a team player, this Carl is.
Carl's a great guy, yeah. And so he implants Carl's brain into this new body played by Michael Gwynn. And Michael Gwynn is so good in this role because the Frankenstein in this movie is not a monster. He's a normal looking man. I mean, there's some scars and everything, but he doesn't look monstrous. And Michael Gwynn has to play him with a lot more humanity than you typically see in a Frankenstein movie because the brain is not damaged. It's not abnormal, so he can talk fluently. You know, he's not staggering around like a zombie. But he still has to give off the impression that he's not natural. And so when Carl wakes up in this new body, he starts to freak out a bit because he remembers there were some brain swapping with some monkeys that Dr. Frankenstein did earlier that didn't turn out too well because the monkey with the brain that got swapped started turning very raged and aggro. So Carl's afraid he may do that. So he tries to escape Dr. Frankenstein's laboratory. And those, as any Frankenstein movie, things start to go horribly wrong. Carl starts to feel the effects of being in this new body, and he becomes enraged, and he ends up killing somebody. So Dr. Frankenstein is found out by the police, and there's this whole thing where they're trying to recapture him and kill him and deal with the Carl Frankenstein monster running around. But I just absolutely love this one because it's a different story from the normal Frankenstein. You have a monster that's not really a monster. He's more of a human. And Michael Gwynn has to play this guy as he descends from humanity to monster throughout the film. And even as the movie progresses, he starts to get more monstrous because he starts taking on the characteristics of Carl the Hunchback. So it's really neat. It's a really neat transition from humanity to monster. And I'm going to go ahead and tell you spoilers because this movie's 50 years old.
Yeah.
But Dr. Frankenstein, I have to tell you this because it's funny. Dr. Frankenstein does escape. And the way he escapes is the mob, basically everybody, his patients find out he's Frankenstein and they beat him to death. But his assistant manages to harvest his brain before he dies and put it in a new body that looks exactly like Peter Cushing. I don't know where he found this Peter Cushing body, but he found it. It just has a mustache. So he found,
maybe the linen store.
So he found a Peter Cushing with a mustache body. He puts the brain in that, and now Dr. Frankenstein is alive and well again and takes up a new residence. And what do you think his name is, Brian? What is his new alias?
This time I'm going with Dr. Frank.
You're right. It's Dr. Frank. It was Dr. Frank. Yes. So you were right on the money. So that's how
I mean, he might as well this next time just go for Dr. Frank Stein.
Frankenstein. Yeah, so it's great. Yeah. So anyway, I will have to say this movie as a sequel is as good, if not better, than the original Curse of Frankenstein. And it's all because of Michael Gwynn. I would dare say, be it blasphemous, I think he's a better Frankenstein than Christopher Lee.
Oh, wow.
And that's not necessarily because Michael Gwynn's a better actor. I would never say that. But it's because this version of Frankenstein has this level of humanity that the other Frankensteins don't get to portray. So it's more the role. But man, if you liked Curse of Frankenstein, you're going to love Revenge of Frankenstein. It's a very, very good sequel.
You did this isn't one of the ones in my set, right? That I have.
It is. It's on one of the Hammer double feature sets that we have.
Oh, okay, cool.
I think it's on there with one of the Mummy films. So definitely check this one out. It's really, really good. All right. So next up, Brian, your Amityville project, I believe, is still on hold.
Yeah, so my project has to be on hold because it's arriving. It was supposed to arrive to this week, but it's on the day we're recording this. It's coming a day after. So yeah, what I did replace it with though was watching some of the screeners from the Etheria Film Festival 2020. It's going to be released it's already released by the time you listen to this, but I'm going to go through the little synopsis here so you know what it's all about. So The Etheria Film Festival, it says, because of the worldwide COVID-19 quarantine in effect, Etheria will not be having a live event as planned in June 2020 at the Egyptian Theater in Hollywood, California. Instead, Etheria 2020 will be a digital event, and they want us all there with them. So it says, basically, Etheria's 2029 short films will be available to watch on Shudder. See, Shudder's coming through with everything. AMC Network's premium streaming service for horror, or anyone that listens to this knows what that is, but, this is a general press release. So it's a service for horrors, thrillers, and the supernatural. On Friday, June 19th, 2020 through July 20th, 2020, new members can sign up for a 30-day free trial with promo code Etheria at Shudder.com. So for some reason, if you are listening to this podcast and somehow do not have Shudder, there you go. You get a 30-day free trial. In addition, live celebrations featuring interviews, panels, and much more with Etheria 2020 filmmakers, judges, friends, and fans will be hosted by the Screenland Armour Theater in Kansas City, Missouri on June 20th. Tickets for that separate celebration can be found on screenlandonline.com/Etheria. So this, like it said in there, it had 9 shorts. There was a mix of everything. There was some horror comedy, a little bit of sci-fi.
Oh, that's cool.
They're all really good, though. All really got their own merits for different things. So I definitely suggest you watching all of those.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to
and
that.
I mean, it's as short films go. I mean, they're they pack the punch. Like there's good gore in some of them, and it's got some really good effects. It's like they do not look low budget. Any of these are short films, but they're a high quality. Every one of them.
Nice. Well, we had one last thing on the rundown that I'm going to talk about. It is not horror related, but since I know you guys are all Back to the Future fans, I'm assuming, if you're anything like me and Brian, I did get a copy of Back to the Future Back in Time. I had to look up the name because there's 2 Back to the Future games coming out this month. This is a board game, a cooperative board game, which plays out the events of the first movie. And what is so cool about this is you get to play either Doc, Marty, Jennifer, or Einstein the dog, which sounds silly, but Einstein's power is actually really, really good. So you're playing on a map of Hill Valley. There's a nice little assembled clock tower, dice tower that comes with the game that you can roll your dice in if you really want to. It looks kind of cool. There's a little DeLorean that's already pre-painted that you can
neat,
that goes along the board. And what you have to do is you have to accomplish 3 goals in order to win. So there's a time tracker that every turn you move this time tracker, and as it goes along, it counts down to the moment when lightning strikes the clock tower. By the time that lightning strikes the clock tower, you have to have 3 goals performed. Number 1, George and Lorraine have to be in love, Marty's parents. And that you accomplish that by moving a love meter up and making them fall in love. You have to have all 3 parts of the DeLorean, which is the rope, the hook, and the gasoline. And then you have to have moved the DeLorean to Main Street so that it can take off and hit the clock tower at the right time. So you have to have all 3 of those goals done by the time the game ends. And the way you do this is each player has what are called power tiles. Each one, you start with 5 power tiles, and each tile corresponds to an action you can take. And typically, each tile, you can either use it to move 3 spaces, or you can use it to roll a specific colored die. And these specific colored die are used to do challenges. The pink die are used to raise the love meter to make George and Lorraine fall in love, which can only be done if George and Lorraine are in the same space, because there are little figures for George and Lorraine.
So what are they, like the Frankenstein and his monster?
Yeah, it's sort of like that. Yeah. There's a Biff miniature that roams around the board, making your life miserable.
Is there a little Billy Peltzer one that blocks you from getting to Biff?
No, I wish there was. No,
like fans of our New Jersey HorrorCon episode will remember that one.
The blue dice will let you knock out Biff, which kind of delays him and prevents him from moving. The yellow dice are used to move the DeLorean. And the green dice are used to get items for the DeLorean and that kind of thing. So you're flipping these tiles to show that you've used them, and you can flip as many as you want to do as multiple. Like if you wanted to roll multiple dice, you could do that. And it's a really, really cool game because you're constantly having to escort George and Lorraine around because they move every turn. They kind of move randomly based on these cards you flip over. So they're constantly moving apart, and you're having to like escort them back together and perform these love meter challenges to try to get them to fall in love. And in the meantime, Biff is running around and he's constantly moving towards Lorraine or George, trying to mess you up. And every time you roll dice, there's a Biff face on these dice that could come up, and that's always like a fail. And it always makes Biff move closer to George and Lorraine or reduce their love meter. So what you get is this game where the theme is really, really strong. It really feels like you're playing the first movie. There's a remember the photograph where they start like Marty and his brother and sister start vanishing.
Yeah,
that plays out in the game. There's a photograph with these that's broken up into 6 tiles, and as you reach certain points on the time meter, if George and Lorraine aren't in love yet, you flip the photograph piece over and they start fading out of existence. So if they all fade away, then you lose the game. And it's just really fun because there's never enough time, like any cooperative game, like if you've played Horrified, there's never enough time to do everything you need to do. So you're constantly struggling to figure out the most efficient way to play your turn. And the one thing I just loved about this game is how strongly the theme plays out, because the real core of the game, the hardest challenge is getting George and Lorraine to fall in love. It's harder than moving the DeLorean. It's harder than getting the parts. And even though those pieces are important, the focus is on George and Lorraine, Marty's parents, just like the movie. And I actually went on Board Game Geek and was talking about how I realized that after a couple plays, I realized how strongly the theme tied into Marty's parents more than the DeLorean. And the designer of the game actually wrote back to me and said, thank you for noticing that. Like, we spent a lot of time, the designer spent a lot of time on the IP and putting details in like that and making sure it was balanced like that so that the theme of the movie would come across really strongly. So I just thought that was cool. They put a lot of care and love into this game. If you love Back to the Future, this is a fantastic family game. I even played it with Olivia and Joshua, and they never play games with me. So for me to get them to sit down and play it, it's got to be something special. It's only $30. I don't know how available it is right now because this was not like a Target exclusive. This one was available directly through Funko. I got it from Barnes & Noble. I think it's going to be available at Walmart and Amazon, but they...
this is Back in Time, right?
Yeah, Back in Time. Yeah, they sold out pretty quick.
Yeah, I see. It says like Target, the pre-order sold out, but they also Amazon says it's temporarily out of stock, so it'll probably be back in.
Yeah, it'll be back in. Now, don't be confused because there's another Back to the Future game coming out later this month. I think possibly the next week or two, and it's called Back to the Future Dice Through Time. And in that game, it is also cooperative. But it's a very different mechanically. I'm going to pick that one up too, but it's where you're actually doing time travel type stuff. So you're jumping between time periods and you're leaving items for players in one time period so they can pick it up in another time period. And there's some neat mechanics going on there. And I think that one's about how you're trying to travel through time and fix things that Biff is messing up as he stole the DeLorean. I can highly, highly recommend Back to the Future Back in Time. That's a great family cooperative game. I have not played this new one coming out, the Dice Through Time, but I'm sure it's going to be fantastic as well. It's a different designer, and it plays very differently, so I think it's going to be worth picking up both of these games. I don't think they're going to be very expensive. Well, I told you, Back in Time is $30. I think Dice in Time will probably be priced pretty similar, and it is a Target exclusive, so that one should be coming out in the next couple of weeks at Target. Okay.
Yeah, I know the pre-orders are sold out for that one too, I believe, at Target.
Yeah, so either way, when they come back in stock, and they will, they'll be available. It's just the hype rush right now, trying to get a hold of them.
Well, yeah, where's anyone going right now? I mean, people are just starting to be able to lift things, so they're finally, lift restrictions, so they're now starting to go out. So,
yeah.
I mean, you figure like these were all pre-ordered because people didn't know when they'd be able to get out, and what better thing to do when you're at home is play some games,
Yeah. So I can highly recommend those if you're a Back to the Future fan. Lots of fun. All right, yes. So speaking of games, let's get to our special guest this episode, the fabulous, the wonderful Trisha Hershberger. I think you guys are going to love this interview, so let's roll it.
While it's no secret that other than horror films, Tim and I are huge pop culture and gaming fans. Our guest tonight is one of the most well-known and popular TV and internet hosts regarding those very topics. So we are so excited to welcome to Civil Gore, Trisha Hershberger.
Thank you guys so much for having me. This is so exciting.
Oh my
Awesome.
God.
Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, exciting for us too, because you're such an expert on all these great topics that we love. So it's really cool that you could find some time to come on with us.
I never use the word expert. Thank you for saying so. I always say enthusiast because we live in kind of the golden age of fandom right now, where there are so many video games and so many awesome TV shows and comic book properties and so much content out there that it would be very hard for one person to be an expert in all of it. But hardcore enthusiast, absolutely.
Okay. Well, we just wanted
All
to
right.
make sure you felt really welcome and So.
I appreciate that.
All right, so Trisha, before we start, we just wanted to know how you and your family are doing and hoping y'all are staying safe during quarantine, and kind of how are you keeping yourself sane during this crazy time?
Oh, thank you so much for asking that. I hope that you're all doing fantastic too, and everybody listening right now. It's hard. I have a tiny human. I always like to joke around and say my body 3D printed a tiny human. But I have a tiny human that lives in my house. And childcare is a real issue. I am a person who loves to work. I love what I do for a living. And pre-quarantine, I would work probably 40 to 60 hours a week and think nothing of it because I enjoy what I do. And now that's just not an option. My husband and I are both trying to work full-time plus jobs from home while also taking care of a toddler. And it's been a challenge. Let's just say that. But, I try to take moments out of my day to stream to Twitch or create some type of content just to have that creative outlet, even though I feel like my production output is so much less than it was pre-quarantine. We'll get back there. There will be a new normal eventually.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like it because if you look you up, I mean, there's just like 500 different things you're on. So I was like trying to like prep for the interviews, trying to watch little pieces of all of it to make sure. But so you seem to be still churning along though, which is amazing. So.
Yeah, like I said, I like to stay busy. I really enjoy what I do. So especially in times of crisis and high stress, work makes me happy. I mean, I get to talk about gadgets and games for a living. So just like you guys do this podcast, you're like, oh man, that feels so nice. Like when you're done recording, because you're just talking about stuff you love. So yeah, that is definitely why I'm a workaholic. So I love that you checked out my content. Thank you.
Oh yeah, of course. So just in case there's people living under a rock and they're not familiar with your extensive body of work here, can you give our listeners a bit about how you got started? You're to go into pop culture terms, your origin story, so to speak.
Yes, my origin story. I grew up knowing that I wanted to play for a living. I think I was probably inspired by Tom Hanks in Big, and he gets to play with toys and he gets paid for that. And I was like, oh man, there have to be jobs like that exist. And so at a very young age, I thought, well, actors are just kind of playing let's pretend in movies and getting paid to play. So maybe that's what I want to do. And so all through school and middle school and high school and college, I was a big theater nerd kid because I lived in a rural area. So there wasn't access to audition for television and film. And at that time, we had those really, really old video cameras that you'd have to your parents would have to mount on their shoulders. Like those are the home video and VHS tapes. And it just wasn't quite as prevalent as it is now. And it wasn't quite as easy to do as it is now. So the only thing I had was theater. So I went all through theater. I majored in theater in college and then moved out to LA to what I thought pursue an acting career. And so, I was auditioning for indie films. I've done a lot of horror indie films back in my pre-career times. Indie films, commercials, industrials. My rule was always, if the job pays and I get to keep my clothes on, I will take it. So I was the Hamburglar for a few years for McDonald's. I was like,
Wow.
I don't care. I don't take myself seriously. Give me that hamburger head and I will collect the paycheck. Which is why there's some, what some people I think would consider to be embarrassing stuff from before I really started working in the internet. But especially in those times, you weren't thinking whatever I do might live on the internet forever. Anyway, I feel like I need to do a watch along party on my Twitch channel of some of my old indie horror films that I've been in, because I think it would be a riot. But once I moved out to LA and was working on pursuing this entertainment career for a while, kind of just auditioning for everything that I could, I tripped and fell into YouTube. Now, the funny thing was, even though I was like, hey, I think I want to be an actor, and that's kind of what my whole child trajectory was, I was always into video games, like from a really young age. I was always into tabletop. I spent a lot of time in high school playing Dungeons and Dragons and Magic the Gathering, and I never in my wildest dreams thought that my love of video and tabletop games and acting as a career could meld into one thing. So now it's interesting because I feel like people go to college with the idea of, I want to be a games journalist. That didn't exist when I was going to school. So yeah, I came out to LA, and when I say I tripped and fell into YouTube, I went on an audition. It was just listed on LA Casting, which is a website that anyone can access, that said online news host. And I was like, whatever, online news host. Like, I'm not waiting tables that morning, so let me go audition. And after I did my like news reads, they were like, okay, so here comes the interview portion. And normally in the interview portion of the audition, I get asked what I know about Cardi B, what I know about makeup, celebrity fashion, and no joke, I don't know anything about that stuff. Like, I'm the first one to admit, like, that's where I would lose the job, because they wanted someone who's genuinely passionate about whatever they were casting for. But they weren't asking me what I care about news or what my journalism background was. They said, what do you know about video games? And I was like, say what? But I know a lot. And they said, what kind of books do you like? And I said, well, I really like this fantasy series. You've probably never heard of it, by George R.R. Martin, and just kind of went off. And they said, what kind of movies do you like? What do you read? And they were asking me all of these pop culture questions. And again, this was before pop culture was cool. Wow. So like geek pop culture was not in. And so I really do believe that it was right place at the right time. Like, I really was just able to meld the things that I was really into as my own personal hobbies. And suddenly it became part of my career. So when I realized, instead of going to auditions and trying to be whatever the description of the character was on the audition sheet, I could work in digital media and really just be myself and talk about the stuff I was passionate about, but still be entertaining for people. I was like, this is the best. This is, the melding of both of my things that I love into a job. And really, I've never looked back since. A lot of people are like, oh man, would you want to go back and be in movies now that you have a following and like a foothold? And honestly, I don't think I want to go back to the audition race. Like, I'm really good. I really enjoy what I do now. It's a lot of fun. But I mean, that being said, if someone was going to offer me a role in their film, and I've had a couple moments where like gaming companies just reached out and offered me a role in their commercial, sure, that sounds awesome. I'll come play on set all day. But I understand what a grueling grind it is to work in the film and entertainment industry, because I did it for years before I tripped and fell into YouTube. And it is a lot of work. So to anyone listening who is out there pushing their independent film or creating a film or kickstartering a film, working anywhere in the film industry, I know what a slog it is, and hats off to you.
I have to say, that is one of the things I think that really makes you stand out from a lot of that, because every clips all the clips I've seen of the stuff that you do, you always seem to have like like this giant smile on your face. You could see that there's like legitimate enjoyment out of it, and that's something you can't fake. So that's what, to me, is always one of the things that I thought was so cool about all your stuff.
Thank you for saying that. I do. I genuinely get excited about what I'm talking about, and I think in the beginning of my career, some audience members were a little put off by that, because I think they thought, there's no way she can possibly be this excited about what she's talking about. She must be faking it. She must be putting on something. And I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm just excited. And sometimes when I get really excited, my voice goes higher and I talk really fast. And like, these are just quirks of who I am as a human being. I promise none of it is put upon. But I like to think now that I have so much content on the internet over the course of so many years, people have come to accept that maybe this is just who I am. I mean, the first job I worked at for 3 years, the company had cameras rolling all the time, like a reality show, because they did behind the scenes episodes. So it was like the content we meant to put out, and then all this behind the scenes content. And so, I always thought You really think I can fake it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week? No, I'm not that talented. I don't have that in me. So that's what you see is what you get.
Nice. So Brian and I were looking for horror stuff in your resume because we are a horror podcast, but we love games and we love pop culture. So we're always trying to like meld those two together and find an excuse to talk about them on the podcast. One thing we saw you did was the Vampire the Masquerade LA by Night sessions.
Yes.
I used to play Vampire the Masquerade back in the day, so that was like a blast from the past seeing that.
Yeah, and I played a lot of Vampire the Masquerade in high school as well, and then I hadn't really played it probably from college until I was asked to join the cast of LA by Night. And actually before that, I overheard the like main cast of LA by Night and their GM chatting about a Vampire the Masquerade show. And of course, me being me was like, oh, is someone talking about a Vampire the Masquerade show? I really like that game. I played it a lot in high school. If you have room for a guest star, please invite me on. So I just shamelessly invited myself onto that show. And it took them a while before I got to be a part of it, but they eventually found a character for me, which is so cool because those characters are now canon in Vampire the Masquerade.
Really?
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah, so I play a character named Casey, who is also very fun for me because we created her, me together with the GM, we created her to be like a real angry ball buster. And I normally don't get to play villains, or not to say that she's a villain, but I normally play happy, upbeat, perky characters that are very much like myself. So when I'm given the opportunity to play something that is very, very different from my normal life, the actor in me that, did all that community theater in middle school and majored in classical theater in college comes right back out and it gets very excited. So yeah, LA by Night has been a joy. I've gotten to do a few episodes now on that show, just as a real meanie.
I can't picture that. I got to see some of that because I didn't get. That was one of the things I didn't get to check out. So I have to see that because I cannot picture you as mean. But I will.
Great.
Check that
I'm
out.
like I know everyone listening to this won't be able to see it, but just to get your reaction, let me see if I can find a picture of my character while we're chatting. So continue on, but I'll do some research here.
Okay. Well, actually, this blends into our next question perfectly. Actually, so I know then we'll go right into the hardcore video gaming stuff. But I know you like to do a lot of cosplay. So what is your favorite ones that you like to do or have done in the past?
Oh man, every cosplay that I've worked on has had a different story to it. Because with every cosplay that I've made, I get a little bit better. And so there's kind of two parts to that. There are some cosplays that I love because just being that character is a dream come true. And there are some cosplays that I love because I overcame something really cool in the build process, if that makes sense. Like I did Copperhead from Batman Arkham Origins, which if you've never played that game, Copperhead is female in that. And I think in the mythos of the story, it's the comic book Copperhead, Snakehead Copperhead's daughter. But that was the first time I had worked with leather. Because I took some costuming classes for my theater degree in college, but I am by no means a seamstress. I can't really make my own patterns. So I'm just kind of winging it every time I build a cosplay. And like I said, every time I build something, I learn a new skill. But that was the first time I worked with leather. And so the fact that one came out as good as it did made me so proud. The Wonder Woman I've done recently, I did a Wonder Woman. So after I did Copperhead and was getting better with leather, I did a Wonder Woman back in the day, which now looking back at it, I'm like, oh, I wouldn't wear that again. Like you can see very obvious flaws in that one. But I've done a Wonder Woman since then, after the new Wonder Woman film came out that's based on Wonder Woman's look in the film. And that one I really love because it's just so fun getting to be that character. And especially after the film came out because there's so many kids. Like that year I went to Comic-Con and the day that I wore that cosplay, so many children came up and asked to take pictures with me because they just love Wonder Woman. And one of the photos I took with a little girl actually made the cover of the local San Diego newspaper.
Oh, cool.
When they were writing an article on Comic-Con and they were kind of focusing on the fact that, Comic-Con there's a lot of diverse people that go to Comic-Con. So they used a picture of a female cosplayer with a young female kid comic fan being there. And it was just a really cool opportunity. So I've done a lot. I'm living in my Tifa Lockhart cosplay right now because I felt like there was no way I could play Final Fantasy VII Remake unless I was dressed like Tifa every time I played it.
I just finished that, by the way. That was
Did you? I am
yes.
in the final battle.
Yes, it is fantastic.
I have to beat the final battle, and then I will be done it.
Well, that segues perfectly into my next question, which is video game talk. So what are you playing right now, and what can you recommend in terms of like some horror games and stuff that you
Oh, man, The Last of Us Part 2 is about to come out.
Oh, that's right. Yep. I forgot.
That's every horror fan should be right there. We have like 13 days left? I'm trying to see what day it is now, but Last of Us Part 2 is coming out, and I think a lot of horror fans are really looking forward to that. I'm just about to beat Final Fantasy VII Remake, so that's what I've been playing for quite some time now. And the next major game that I'll probably jump into is Last of Us 2. Video games that are intentionally terrifying are not normally what I would choose to play in my private life. However, they make wonderful streaming content. They are very fun to watch. Another one that I was recently playing that was pretty funny, I did a jump scare highlight cut on my YouTube channel, was Half-Life Alyx.
Really
if anyone has a VR headset that is capable of running Half-Life Alyx, it is the next installment in the Half-Life series, which, of course, everyone was like, what? We're getting a new Half-Life? But the way – it's very interesting because it's not your traditional horror game in that they had to design it for VR, which is a completely different experience. And if you haven't had the chance to play a scary game in virtual reality, the first time will be a shocker. I think when people see – streamers and gamers, when you watch someone else play a scary game in virtual reality, you always think they're faking it or hyping up their reaction, because even if you can see the screen that they're seeing, you're not getting the surround sound piped right into your ears. Like when you are in it, you are really in it, and the smallest little noise behind you can be terrifying. So it is a whole new way to tell those type of stories, and it is incredibly effective. So I highly recommend Half-Life Alyx as well, or just VR scary games in general.
I did the I played the first level of the Exorcist one on Oculus, and I nearly punched through my closet accidentally. I went through the breach, the wall that comes out, but it was too fast to react because I moved, because something jumped out, and you forget how like immersive that is. I mean, the first time I saw Oculus, I was like, now I see what the thing is. I get it now. I get why people are so into the VR thing. So I had to buy one right away. But then that was awesome. So, and I remember you had actually gave us some. I had reached out to you on Instagram and asked some suggestions, so you gave me. So I have to download those.
Woohoo! Okay, here, I found that picture for you. This is my character.
Oh wow!
Yeah.
On LA by Night.
Yeah, I see anger in there. I see a little bit of anger in there. But
she hates everybody.
Yeah. But I guess it's good, right? They say you're supposed to play, the best challenge is to play the opposite of yourself, right? So there you go.
I feel like it's the best escape. Wow, it really is. Like it's a really nice departure from whatever your normal life is, and where you can just get in and play. It feels really good. That's why Dungeons and Dragons and other tabletop RPGs are such wonderful escapes for people, because you can be anything you want.
I'll tell you, our questions, and not to toot our own horn here, but our questions are just rolling the perfect segues. This is so good. But you
did a good job, Brian.
It's because you guys are so good at your jobs.
See, that's awesome. See, that's nice to hear. I think it was just luck on my part, but thank you. But this I think is a fun question. So if you could design a video game with total creative control, any kind of format, any kind of, basically every little thing down to the last pixel, what would it be?
If I could design a game, that's so hard, because the retro gamer in me is like, oh man, I want to make a really hard platformer, like something that's super pixel arty, like Celeste. If you played Celeste, that came out a couple years ago, But the storyteller in me is like, oh, a narrative game that has super high emotional stakes, like a Life is Strange or something like that, where you are these characters, you want to feel with these characters. That would be really cool to do. I don't think I want to make a horror game. No offense.
No, it's okay.
A horror game, because I don't know that mentally I can live in that space.
Yeah.
Long enough. The only other kind of game I'd like to make is maybe a resource management or simulation game. I
cool.
really enjoy those type of games. I can sink into them, and I really like the complexity and detail in them. So, any of the games where you kind of get to have ultimate control, like a Sim City or The Sims or Frostpunk or any of those games, it might be really fun to like get into the crunchy nitty gritty of all the details that would take to design a game like that and think of a game like that. That could be fun too.
Yeah, we're big theme park fans, so we love like Roller Coaster Tycoon and Planet Coaster, all those. So I totally get you there. Those are really fun.
Mm-hmm. And haven't you played those games before and thought like, oh, I just need a way that I could get the janitor to patrol on like a 30-minute, so you would want to add all those different things to the game. And with those games, for me, they are always impossible in the beginning because it takes so long to learn all the different complexities. But then once you've mastered the complexities in the game, it never feels complex enough.
Yeah, I know what you mean. And by the way, to answer your question, I literally just overpaid the janitors, hoping they would just go where I wanted them to. But,
Yep.
Mm-hmm. They never did. But.
So we know you're huge on Twitch, and Civil Gore actually just made our first Civil Gore Twitch channel. We have no idea what we're doing.
Yeah.
So what kind of pointers would you give to a first-time Twitcher?
Well, I saw that you guys followed me the other day when I was on stream, so that's a great first step. No, I'm totally
That's what I thought. I figured, I'm like, this has got to be like rule number one is to follow you. So,
No, but I mean, the advice that I would give is pay attention to when you stream, how often you stream, be consistent with the time of day that you stream. And the biggest thing I can give you if you're starting on a new platform is advertise on other platforms. Like, I think a lot of people join Twitch and think, well, if I stream every day for 6 hours a day at the exact same time, consistency, people will just show up. But even if you're consistent, if they don't know where to find your channel or don't even know that your channel exists, that in and of itself is not enough to help your channel grow. So really what you want to do is collaborate with other streamers that might already have a bit of an audience. I wouldn't shoot too high. I wouldn't like hit up Ninja and be like, hey, can we stream together? Like find someone that's right kind of in the same range of followers that you currently have, maybe just a little bit above. But also make sure that on your Twitter, on your YouTube, on your podcast, on your Facebook, on whatever other platform you're on, post highlight cuts of your Twitch stream. Post funny moments from your Twitch stream so you can constantly be reminding people, oh, and hey, we also have a Twitch now. Because that's where you're going to get your followers. I know, at least for me, when I first started out on Twitch, after every stream, I'd look to see how many followers I got during that stream. When really, most of your followers are going to join when you're off air. And now Twitch has something called channel trailers. So make a really fun channel trailer so that if people come to your page when you're offline, they know what you're about. They know what type of content you're offering. So with that being said, what type of content are you offering?
Well, I know we want to do we play a lot of the Friday the 13th video game.
Mm-hmm.
So we figured that would be fun to show us playing that. Like we've had, we want to, and then we could, eventually invite some listeners on to play and stuff like that and do like a fun kind of thing. I mean, that's the start. I mean, we also just joined TikTok, and it's literally one little 30-second video of Tim reviewing a movie so far. So it shows you where we have ambitious goals. We just don't.
Baby steps.
It's really they're slow moving for our.
Now, TikTok I'll have to come back to you guys for advice on, because that is the one platform that I was like, you know what? I don't got time for that.
Yeah, we haven't been able to tick or talk really. So
apparently we don't have time either.
Yeah. Although I have plans, I do have plans to kind of show my movie collection off in a funny way, but I haven't really got around to doing it yet. But we will get there. We'll get there.
Yeah.
So now, of course, we want to give you a chance to promote
I know this is a big task now, but to promote any current and upcoming projects you're working on.
Oh boy. So I guess the stuff that I am currently hosting, so acting as talent and sometimes pre-production for, but that don't live on my specific channels. I do a lot of tech videos and PC builds and that kind of stuff for Newegg currently. I also do a DIY in 5 kind of tech made easy series for Kingston Technology, and that lives on their YouTube channel. I do a gaming series for Fandom. So if you ever go to a video games wiki page, you might just see a video pop up with my face in it explaining some news about that particular title. And then for my own properties that I'm running with right now on Twitch, I have a show every Tuesday called the Twitch Gong Show, which is like the old Gong Show television game show, if you remember it.
Yeah,
but for video games. So the audience gets to vote in real time whether an up-and-coming indie game, usually it's alpha builds, beta builds, etc. So very early in the development process, the audience gets to vote whether it's awesome as is or whether maybe it should be gonged and we move on to the next title. So
cool.
I get to showcase a lot of indies that are up and coming that way, and I love that show. Plus, it's heavily audience interactive. And then Sundays and Wednesdays, I stream to my Twitch channel, just whatever game I'm playing through at the time. Wednesdays, I like to call Wacky Wednesdays and incorporate something weird about that stream, whether it's having a buddy on my stream or random stream shenanigans like you do, but it's usually still gaming based. And then on Fridays, I do a talk show / podcast right now with Maude Garrett called Power Up, and the PWR in Power stands for playing, watching, and reading.
I wondered what that was, actually.
Yeah, we talk about some recommendations, especially now that a lot of people are sheltering in place. They're consuming a lot more digital content. So we talk about what games we're playing that might not be on people's radar. Same thing with television. Same thing with either audio books or comic books that we're reading. So, and we have a guest on every other week. So that's a really fun one too. But that airs on my Twitch channel live every Friday and then goes on Maude Garrett's YouTube channel after that if people want to watch the VODs. And then my YouTube channel is mostly highlight cuts from my Twitch channel. But occasionally, if I have extra time, or like if the company's nice enough to send me one of their new products that's coming out, like a tech gadget or something, and it's something I'm genuinely interested in, if I have time to make a video on it, I'll try to make some kind of video on it for my YouTube channel, just really for fun and to be creatively fulfilled. And then I do a little vlog series on my YouTube channel as well. But yeah, that's my other stuff that's going on, in addition to, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook.
Couple of things.
Yeah. Speaking of Instagram, Twitter, where can our listeners find you?
On YouTube or Twitch, it's /Trisha Hershberger. So just my full name spelled out, all one word, all lowercase. And on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook, my handle is ThatGirlTrish, but there is no I in the girl. So it's just GRL Trish.
All right.
Nice. That should be easy.
Yeah.
And we'll make sure we share it. We'll make sure we share all of those in our show notes and stuff, because I know we follow you on all of those. So
perfect. Thank you. Come on by, say hello, chat with me about games, tabletop or video or tech. I have so many people that tweet me asking for PC building advice, and if I have time to answer, I always will.
Yeah, that's the thing I have to say. You are so interactive and so great on their social media channels, because some people just kind of like move on with say, and then move on. But you actually really interact and engage, which is really cool. So
thank you for saying that. I mean, I really do consider the people who show up again and again in my feed to be more like long distance friends than followers. There's some people that have been following my content for 6-7 years, and I 100% know their handle, and I've gone to conventions and they'll run up to me and say, I'm this person on YouTube, and I'm like, oh my god, I know exactly who you are, and we feel like we've been friends for years.
Well, now you'll be easy to remember us. You'll be, this is the two horror knuckleheads that interviewed me.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for coming on. This is quite a treat, and I'm sure our listeners are going to absolutely love this interview. So again, thank you so much for carving out a little bit of time out of your crazy busy schedule to hang out with us for a few minutes.
Yes, thank you so much.
Indeed, it was my pleasure, guys. Everybody stay safe, stay healthy, and enjoy what you love.
Okay, Brian. I mean, we've been on a streak of fantastic interviews here lately, and that was just another one to add to the list.
Oh yeah, I mean, and if you know anyone that watches her YouTube or your Twitch, you could see that she is just a super fun person, and let me tell you, she is exactly the same as you could hear, because she's just so fun and so personable and so great to talk to. So we feel really, really lucky that we were able to set that up, and so thankful and grateful to her for coming on and spending some time with us. Because if you see her schedule, she must be down to the minute.
Yeah, she's not sitting around
scheduling.
bored in quarantine
Yeah.
waiting for some podcast to call her up to Zoom. So
No,
her
no.
time was
So
definitely very appreciated.
Yeah. So thank you again, Trisha, and hope you guys all enjoyed that. And definitely we'll put her contact stuff in the show notes, so you can go check her out if you haven't seen any of her stuff. It's great.
All right, so let's get to our feature of the week. We went for a video game themed horror film, which is a little hard to come by sometimes. I had never seen this one. Brian immediately jumped to this one, and I had not seen it, so I was definitely on board. This is BRAINSCAN from 1994. Directed by John Flynn, starring Edward Furlong as Michael, Frank Langella as Detective Hayden, T. Ryder Smith as the Trickster, Amy Hargreaves as Kimberly, Jamie Marsh as Kyle, Victor Ertmanis as Martin, and David Himblin as Dr. Fromberg. A teenager is part of an interactive video game where he kills innocent victims. Later, the murders become real. So, Brian, this one was I know you told me this was a guilty pleasure back in your college days. Now, I unfortunately did not have the nostalgia factor on my side for this one. So I was watching what appeared to me to be an extremely dated 90s computer game horror movie. So I don't.
Oh, that's what it is. It's really what it is. But like I said, yeah. See, so I discovered there's a friend of mine that I knew when I lived in California. My friend Aaron. He had said, I remember we were talking about. He's like, "Have you guys ever seen BRAINSCAN?" And I'm like, "No, what is this?" And so he put it on, and I probably saw it. I guess it came out in '94, so I think I probably saw it in '95, '96, like it was a year after it had come out, in the theater. So it was, I guess, when it first came to home release, and back then, I mean, it was definitely like something you don't see that often. So I loved it, and it became a guilty pleasure of mine. I watched it over and over again. I loved the soundtrack to it. I have the soundtrack. So it's just it was back then. It's a fun movie. I can totally relate to someone picking this up now and watching it for the first time after seeing, what technology's become, and just, I mean, we now live in a world where we don't see Edward Furlong a lot. Back then you saw him all the time. Yeah. So that's a difference there. And yeah, so, I mean, but, I could see like almost everything that, probably criticism that could probably come up for this movie, I can relate to it, but at the same time, to me, it's like all part of its charm, because remember, I did discover it when it was, was at its proper time. And, I mean, yes, is it cheesy? Is it fun? I mean, do you want to say the Trickster character is just like Tim said, he was kind of like Howie Mandel, Little Monsters. I see that, and then maybe add a little Freddy Krueger in there.
Yeah.
There's definitely, it's not, by far, that is not an original character. And at some level, you're not sure why he's there. but still, it's one of those things. So I will go back to I think I've said this on the show many a times, and I go back to one of my favorite teachers I ever had. She was my English teacher, but she also did a film study class in high school. So I got to take a film study class in high school.
That's cool.
Which to me was awesome. Yeah. And she, on the first day of class, she says, I tell this to my classes every single time. She goes, if you buy the premise, you buy the flick. And back then when I first saw this, I bought the premise, and I bought the flick. And, it's like I didn't ask questions. Why is it's supposed to be a video game, virtual reality thing. Why is there this guy named the Trickster coming in? It doesn't make all the sense in the world. But you know what? I had fun watching it back then, and and it grew on me. So it's become a guilty pleasure. And I tell you, when I watched it now, I remembered how much I loved it. So it brought back a flood of emotion. Now I know Tim is, it's just, that's impossible for that to happen to him. So, I mean, I could see where he might have some criticisms on
now,
it.
I will say, I did not hate it by any means. I actually really enjoyed watching it. For me, anything with computers or gadgetry, and we've talked about this before, Brian, even on modern films, there was that one where they had the app on the phone or something that was... Remember how like you liked it a lot more than I did, because anything with technology, I'm in IT, so I work with computers all the time. That's the only field, literally the only profession I've ever been in is IT.
Yeah.
So anything on film that is unrealistic as it relates to technology drives me up the wall in some sense. Now, obviously, I can suspend disbelief for some things and still enjoy it, but even like classic episodes of the X-Files where it's like an evil computer or something, I just cringe because it's just so far-fetched to me. So it's always going to be a hard sell going in. I don't care how good the movie is. If it's about some kind of evil computer stuff, it's always going to be a hard sell. Then you add Edward Furlong. Edward Furlong. I was reading the trivia ahead and they called him Eddie. But I've always disliked Edward Furlong, and even in Terminator 2, I disliked him. Like, as much as I love Terminator 2, and I love Terminator 2, he is the absolute worst part of that entire movie. And I don't like to talk bad about people, but he cannot act. And as you will see in our trivia, the director agreed with me, so I'm not crazy. He is a terrible actor, and I hope he doesn't listen to this show, because I'm sure he's a nice guy, but or maybe he's, I don't know. Again, I don't like talking bad about people, but there's some actors you just don't like, and you just can't get past it.
Oh, we all have them. I will say, I think Frank Langella eases the excessive Furlong a little bit in it, because Frank Langella is awesome.
He is awesome. He is the absolute best part of this whole movie.
And think about it, he's a big guy to be in a movie like this. This was a B horror movie,
It's just like getting Donald Pleasance for Halloween. I mean, he adds that level of serious theater to what is essentially a pretty run-of-the-mill, mediocre 90s horror film. So he was absolutely the best part of the whole movie, and I really enjoyed every scene that he was in. Every scene that had Edward Furlong, which was almost all of them, was like nails on a chalkboard to me. Somewhat every time he opened his mouth, and he's especially whiny in this because he's really young, so he's like super whiny sounding. But again, let's go back to the movie and not the actors. He finds out from his friend Kyle about this game called BRAINSCAN, which is supposedly this hot new game. And I remember this was back when CD-ROM games were all the big deal. I remember, oh my god, Brian, I remember going to Walmart trading. I mean, I didn't have money. I was working at a freaking grocery store on minimum wage. I had no money for a computer or anything. I went to Walmart and scraped up every dime to buy this crappy Packard Bell computer just because it had a CD-ROM drive in it, just so I could play Seventh Guest, because that was the first CD game that came out. I blew every bit of money I had on this one computer, and then I would slowly take that computer and upgrade parts and make it better than it was, and it was a crazy time where you would just do anything to play a CD-ROM game. So I kind of understood his...
Yeah, and that was big. Remember when the Sega CD-ROM attachment came out?
Yeah,
and
I just found mine.
And it had the... Oh, really? Yeah, I still have mine buried in the storage facility there. And I remember it was such a cool thing because the big deal was like full motion video. And, you got games like Night Trap and Sewer Shark.
Oh, yeah.
And
great.
so, now, so now you look back and he's like, okay, so the guy put a CD in there. But you think about it, you can't knock the technology, the fact that CDs still exist, and you could still, games are still going in on discs, so it's I mean, so obviously they were onto something, and so it's great. So it's kind of like, it brings back that kind of nostalgia, but it's funny because it was like this, he still had this dial in setup deal going on where he would he had his computer. He did have everything voice activated, which was pretty cool.
Yeah.
And he had that little Igor, he named it Igor. And so he would go in and be like, Igor, dial that. So he goes, yes, master.
Yeah, that was cool.
I mean, it was just like that stuff is fun to me. I always loved that.
I did like that.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I did like that stuff. I like the 90s nostalgia piece of it. I like just looking at his room, seeing like the Aerosmith posters on the wall and stuff like that. I thought that was cool. But he gets this game called BRAINSCAN, and apparently this thing sends some kind of signal through the television that affects your brain. But essentially what the premise of the film is, the game basically puts you into a reality, an alternate reality, I guess. I mean, something that's so close to reality that you can't distinguish. And he is persuaded to murder somebody in the game. And he doesn't find out until after he comes out of the game that the murder was committed in real life. So now he's like trapped. And that's when this trickster guy emerges. And he's sort of like this mohawked demon thing. I don't know. He reminded me of Howie Mandel in Little Monsters, as Brian pointed out.
Yeah, he is. He's like, picture Howie Mandel's look, but with Freddy Krueger's kind of like things he does. Like he's bending his fingers back in one scene, and he's poking his eyes out. Doing all kind of things that a person can't do.
But they call him the trickster, but he's not. He's less of a trickster and more of like a really evil.
That's like a manipulator.
Yeah, I mean, I don't consider murder like like this funny trick. Murder your neighbor kind of thing. But so he's like a super bad influence on Michael. And Michael, of course, is now terrified that he's going to get arrested for murder because of this game. So that's where Frank Langella comes in as the detective on the trail of finding out what's going on here. And that's how he...
Yeah, and he leaves like he's finding like evidence of the murders in his freezer. Which is kind of weird that his room had a full fridge in it. I never quite, not sure what that's all about, but not even like a college fridge. We're talking like legit fridge.
Yeah, well, I mean, more power to him.
Oh, yeah, no, I mean, he never really needed to leave that room. Well, I guess the bathroom, but other than that, he really didn't need to leave the room. He had food, he had, although he had a lot of raw meat in there. That was another...
That was a little weird,
weird choice. But, and I think we should say, too, that... it was kind of fun to see the classic issues of Fangoria in there. That was where they got the ad for the game.
Oh, yeah, that was cool.
That was an actual issue of Fangoria back in the thing. It's in our trivia we'll get to later. So
yeah, we must say there's also a girl next door that he is an admirer of. That is also an admirer of
maybe
him.
A little peeping Tom-ish.
Yeah, which to be fair, she was peeping right back. So.
Oh yeah, no, she was. They heard that, like, I guess in a voyeuristic way. There's a little like kind of like a little cuteness going on there. I guess they're cute. They're back and forth. They're basically so they're both like they both. Neither one of them is not shy enough to tell them. So they just kind of look at each other through the window. He gets a better view, obviously, because he watches her change. And her view is just him like doing creepy things in his room, I guess. But so there's it's kind of like that old thing that I'm sure every guy growing up wanted to have an attractive girl across the way that he could look into, and it's done in how many movies, for God's sake? I mean, like, literally.
I even remember growing up, there was always some girl in the neighborhood that you had the eye for, that you would ride your bike by her house, and
yeah.
So I get that. And the trickster will not leave poor Michael alone. Like, he refuses to leave. Like, he's constantly always there, like, bothering him. So he has no real escape from this. And
he is entertaining, the trickster, though.
He is.
The performance by T. Ryder Smith was really well done.
Yeah, definitely. But the movie gets darker when the trickster instructs Michael to kill his neighbor Kimberly that he is in love with. So now he's like caught between, doing what the trickster... he really has no way out at this point, because he can't not do what the trickster says, basically, right? He can, but he's kind of trapped. This guy's never going to leave him alone until he does what he tells him to do.
Yeah, and we should say, too, so the game is in... basically, he implies the game is in 4 parts. And so each of the level he plays... It's kind of like a new. So the first is like a different challenge. So the first one is that he's got to do the murder. Second one is he says, well, there was a witness. You have to go
Right. Yes.
Figure out the witness. And then sadly the next one. I mean, I guess spoiler alert here. If you haven't seen it, it's from '94. So I mean that definitely allows us to do our spoilers. He ends up then having to sadly kill his best friend. Which Kyle, and they, so then at this point, it's now disc 4, the one person left that could possibly know what he's involved in is, of course, the girl next door, Kimberly, and so he basically, now he's got this dilemma, and he's fighting with everything he has to prevent that from happening. I mean, we don't need to go through the very ending, but yeah, and all the while, like, Frank Langella is like super sleuth cop. I mean, he notices everything. Like, you ever try and pull anything past his character in this, you're not doing it.
No,
like,
he
literally
so
notices
imposing.
like that there was, yeah, and he noticed there's ashes in the fireplace, and he's like, well, it's summertime. Why would anyone put a fire?
Yeah.
And he like sneaks in and he gets like samples, and then he
had a very
realizes that the footprints match. It's like it's all.
He had a very Christopher Lee air about him in this movie. I thought he just that big, tall, imposing gravitas to his role. He was very, very good in this.
I have his scent, by the way. Do you want to know his scent?
Oh yes, absolutely.
That I came up with.
Yeah.
I figured, okay, this is my description of him, especially in this movie. He's scotch, beef bouillon, a freshly laundered shirt, and a hint of clove.
Oh, yes, for sure. Absolutely. I'm
right?
100%
that pretty
that.
much nails him.
That nails it right there. Yeah.
So that will be his candle.
we got to get that celebrity sense.
I know.
Instagram
now we have a bunch. I have them all lined up to go. I just need to start the campaign.
Yeah.
So to
it's going to require some Photoshop skills, so we got to.
Yeah. I got enough. I got some good ones going, so we'll get it going.
Oh, nice. Well, yeah, and that's the movie. It's one of those I could see growing on me because I didn't hate it. I had an initial bad reaction because of Edward Furlong and because it was computer evil stuff, but I can see the charms of the Trickster character. Definitely, Frank Langella was awesome in it, and the '90s nostalgia kind of was starting to grow on me by the end of the movie. So I could see maybe this one I could have a soft spot for at some point.
Yeah, plus think about it. I mean, there's such an us quality to that movie. I mean, the kids are reading the old classic Fangorias. They have a horror club in their high school, and the teachers on them for like the gore that they're watching.
Oh, he was really good too. The teacher, the guy who played the teacher.
Yeah. So I mean, if you think about it, it's got a lot of stuff that we could relate to back, Oh,
also bonus that they had Primus in this movie.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And that's the Trickster song. If he puts that CD in,
the Trickster likes Primus, so that's a plus in his favor.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. The soundtrack for this is great. I have the soundtrack. I bought, and I think George Clinton did the regular score for it. So I mean, you this was when this came out. It was probably expected to be. I don't remember what it did in the box office. I don't remember. I remember seeing it, like I said, on home video. I don't remember what it did, but I have a feeling just by the way that was at that time, I had a feeling this was probably meant to be pretty big. I have a feeling this was supposed to be a bigger movie than it became in the theaters. And someone correct me if I'm wrong, because I just don't remember it being in the theaters back then. So just by the whole background of it, and Edward Furlong at the time, I mean, was known. I mean, so I mean, you got him, you got Frank Langella. I mean, I think Amy Hargraves though, she's still working today actually. So she was, she was relatively new at that point. I don't think the friend did. I don't know if he did a lot of other stuff, but yeah. So it was and I think it took a lot from other things. Like the plot was not super original. But I don't know. Like I said, it's always been I've had a soft spot for it since the first day I saw it, and I just always been one of my favorites, and I'm glad we finally got to do it. But I would, you should revisit it down the road sometime.
Yeah.
I bet it'll grow on you.
Yeah, probably so. All right. So let's go through here some of the trivia I'm going to mention one that was up here in the discussion points. Because, well, I don't know. That's the ending of the film. Do we really care if we want to? Do we want to say that one?
I mean, at this point,
it's a 90s film. Well, I guess we could say. Yeah. So originally towards the end of the film, the Trickster merges with Michael, and it was supposed to form this horrific abomination, which was supposed to terrify Kimberly. And we don't know why the scene was cut, but because the filmmakers were really proud of how horrific the abomination looked, but we don't get to see that in the movie. And the movie, I will have to say, there's some pretty rough looking CGI effects, but they were. But for its credit, this was 94. I mean, it was a little bit impressive that they even tried to do CGI in a horror film like this. It was kind of cool. So
and they had that and they had that that little bit of morphing.
Yeah, it wasn't. It wasn't as
used.
bad as I expected it to be.
No, it could have. I've seen a lot worse from that time.
I've seen a lot worse after that time period. So
they're true, right?
All right, so we'll just alternate these, Brian, I guess, for the trivia. But this is the one I wanted to read because it lines up exactly with what I just said about Edward Furlong. So director John Flynn did not get along with Edward Furlong during filming. He later recalled, Eddie Furlong was a 15-year-old kid who couldn't act. You had to slap him awake every morning. I don't want to get into knocking people, but I was not a big Eddie Furlong fan.
And that was written by Tim Wilson. No,
that was the director. Kidding. So, I mean, I'm not crazy.
I know.
I'm not crazy. Nobody liked this kid.
I know. And of course they had some, back then this was a big thing to do. They had a lot of little wink, wink, nod, nod. So it says, in both Kyle and Kimberly's room, you see an Aerosmith poster for Get a Grip, entitled Utterly Aerosmith, which has a track Living on the Edge, which Edward Furlong starred in that video.
Yep. Oh man, what a great run of videos that was for that album. Where you had Alicia Silverstone and Liv Tyler and all those videos. Oh, it was so good. This was originally based on the computer game Brainwaves, released as Brain Scanners in Europe after the film was released.
Oh, here's the one that Tim will like. So and we kind of mentioned it, that the track in the CD played by the Trickster is called Welcome to This World and is performed by Primus. I always like, one of my favorite Primus songs was Jerry's a Race Driver.
Yeah. I like John the Fisherman. That's a good song. Primus did a concert where they reinterpreted the soundtrack to Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. They did a whole concert.
Really?
Yeah, you can find it. I think you can find it out there on YouTube. It's so cool.
Oh, yeah. I will be checking it out.
It is really cool. I missed the chance to see Primus in concert. They actually came to Wilmington and played at the Greenfield Amphitheater, which is this awesome, awesome venue. I wish COVID would go away so we could get back to that, but get back to going to concerts. The Greenfield Amphitheater is right on the lake here in town, which is Greenfield Lake. And it's a very small venue, and it's all out in the open, and you have nice seating, and you can, I think some concerts will let you bring beer, but they sell beer inside, and it's very intimate. Like, you can sit, there's literally no bad seat. You can sit all the way at the top, and sometimes I'll just sit at the very top and not even fight the crowds. And you can see a perfect view of every act that plays there. Now, they don't get the biggest name acts, but occasionally they get some pretty decent sized ones. And Primus came, and that would have been an awesome show because it's like it's like being in a club with Primus, even though you're outside because it's such a small venue. So I wish that would make a comeback, but. One day.
Probably won't be. I have a feeling, just when I see things, it doesn't look like this year at all for those kind of things.
No, like I think year.
I mean, I just saw, I guess, the San Francisco Opera shut down even for the rest of the year.
Yeah,
and
I know.
It's just, I mean, you know what? I think, like, as bad as it is, I'm starting to get to the thing of like, well, you know what? At this point, we're half a year through. Let's just like see this thing through to the end already, and we'll be back next year.
We'll try again next year.
I mean, just think how great it'll be when it all does come back, because it's not like it's gone forever.
Oh, yeah, no, it'll be such a boom because everybody will be so ready for it. Oh, my gosh.
Oh, my God. Yeah, it could actually be better than ever. I mean, So.
A magazine that Edward Furlong's character reads has a poster advertising the Arnold Schwarzenegger film Predator. Furlong's big break came from playing John Connor in Terminator 2 Judgment Day alongside Schwarzenegger just a few years earlier. So lots of little Easter eggs about his career, I guess, there.
Yeah. And so here, what we mentioned before, so the Fangoria magazine that Michael and Kyle read, the fake BrainScan article is Fangoria issue 95 and was published August 1990. And they talk about the eyeballs exploding out. So they talk about the cover, they talk about the whole thing.
This one's kind of just a little little tidbit. The address he lives at is in Montview, New Jersey. There is a town in New Jersey called Montville and another called Montvale, but there is no Montview.
And Montclair.
There's a lot of Monts in New Jersey.
There is. And so the final one we'll give today is, so T. Ryder Smith, who played Trickster, admitted that he was uncredited voice of Igor, Michael's automated phone program. The voiceover was recorded with Smith doing 3 different impersonations. He says the filmmakers used his impression of Boris Karloff.
Perfect. Yeah, that was great.
So, yeah, it was great. I love that. So just to get an idea of it. So anytime his phone rang through his computer, it'd be like, "Master, you have a phone call," and he would call, and like anything he said, he'd be like, "Yes, master." It was great, and it was like this little creepy little Igor guy on his screen. It was. I love that. To me, like, cool. They could have done that gag throughout over and over, and it never got boring.
Yeah, but I remember when I was in high school, in my physics class, our teacher had a computer, and this is how old I am, guys, but he had a computer and he had sound clips from movies on it, and he would play them in class, like
awesome.
that matched up to whatever he was teaching about, and it would be like quotes from Ghostbusters and stuff, and I thought it blew my mind. I thought that was the coolest thing ever, that he had movie dialogue clips that he could play on his computer. You think about how just mundane that is today, but back then that was
God,
yeah. I really literally wanted to save up for a computer just so I could have clips from Ghostbusters, audio clips that I could play on demand. That just seems.
And now you got soundboards. You can do that.
It's so funny nowadays to think about that. So, Brian, what is our beer pairing for this week?
So we traveled, not literally because COVID, but we virtually traveled over to your neck of the woods there, to Green Man Brewery in Asheville,
Green
North
Man's
Carolina.
Great. They have some great beers.
Yeah, I've actually had some stuff from there, and there's a beer they have, believe it or not, called Trickster.
I can get my hands on this one now.
Yeah, 7%, and it's an unfiltered tropical fruit-forward IPA, which I absolutely love.
Yeah.
It says gives off a notes of pineapple, peach, and watermelon. Smooth with medium bitterness and just enough malt backbone to support the hops. Brewed with pale malt and dried hops with 2 pounds per barrel of El Dorado, Mosaic, and Simcoe. And Mosaic ones, that pretty much is always a guarantee I'm going to love it.
Yeah.
Mosaic and Citra pretty much are 2 hops that if they're in there, I'm going to guarantee give it a try. So
there's every possibility I've had this beer, by the way, because I've had a lot of Green Man stuff. So I don't remember it specifically, but there's a good chance I've had it, especially if it has tropical stuff, because I'm a sucker for tropical IPAs.
Yeah, and I've had some Green Man before. I don't know if it was that one when we were by you, or you brought it maybe one time to one of our little beer swaps or something, but I know I've had Green Man before. So
yeah, I've got some stories about it was a concert Kevin and I went to. I think it was Farm Aid, and they this is the biggest combo ever. So you got Farm Aid, which is literally an all-day concert, right? Yeah. So you're going to be drinking all day. And they decided to coincide it with a craft beer festival.
Oh my God.
In the stadium, or not in the stadium, the what do you call it? The amphitheater, or whatever they call it, the concert venue. They combine it with a craft beer festival. So you go in there and you've got like 10 different breweries, North Carolina breweries, selling beer for this all-day Farm Aid concert. And I just remember, because it sparked my memory, because I think we started off with Green Man, because Green Man was there. Yeah. And I remember the one that finally tipped me over the edge was one called Devil's Tramping Ground from Aviator. And it's like a 9 or 10%. And I didn't realize it. And we'd already been drinking all day long. And we'd had a ton of craft beer that day. And I got that one last one, and I don't remember most of what happened after that.
Oh no!
So that's my.
You obviously made it home.
I made it home. Yeah, no, we had Ubers and stuff, but that was a fun concert, but it all started with Green Man. It
Nice.
Kicked it all off. So, all right. So Brian, our triple threat last week, we were looking for an actress, and man, this one stumped you guys.
Yeah, to the date where we're recording this, we've had a lot of valiant attempts, but not, and people are close.
Wow.
They just haven't got
I'm
it
surprised.
yet.
I'm just surprised. But again, it's easy for me because I know the answer going in. I haven't tried to guess these before I find out the answer. All right, so we were looking for an actress. I'm not even going to reveal the actress until the end. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, it's good when you give the answers, though.
Well, I'm gonna be vague about it. All right.
Oh. Okay.
So, clue number 1: while I have no official medical training of note, I have played characters in the medical field well over 10 times. So this person has had many roles playing a nurse, at least 16, and horror fans know her mostly from Rob Zombie's Halloween 2. Clue number 2: while not huge in the horror world, I did have a role in a major horror franchise. Like I said, she had a small role in Rob Zombie's Halloween 2, and, this is going to give it away, she also played the title role in the popular horror film Ma from 2019. Of course, we're talking about Octavia Spencer.
And you know what's funny? This time we gave them an extra clue. We could have said actor, actress, like we usually do, but at least we narrowed it down because can you imagine if we didn't?
Yeah, and now this is the clue I thought people would be able to Google and figure this out. Clue number 3, I'm starring in an upcoming remake of a very popular 1990s film produced by Jim Henson Production Company. Octavia is playing grandmother in the upcoming remake of The Witches.
Yes.
I'm surprised nobody got it from that clue, but...
Yeah, I know at this point, I know David Terry, he was on to something, but he had Labyrinth he was working with, and I was saying, well, you're close, but, that's the wrong year, of course, so...
All right, so we're going to give you another shot at this. And I think this one's a little easier.
Yeah.
I think, maybe a lot easier, but we'll see. So we're looking for another actor or actress. Listen carefully. Clue number 1. My first 2 feature films were living hell, yet my TV role just before it was heavenly. Clue number 2. At one point, I left the franchise I'm known most for, but I returned to it 10 years later. Clue number 3, while I will always be linked to an extremely popular horror franchise, I did appear in another smaller horror franchise.
Now, not that you need an extra clue, but I know there's one person that I think people are going to jump at for this just because, but they're not going to, out of instinct, and it's going to be wrong. But I will say it's someone we've already done. It was an answer already, so remember that. So you should automatically wipe it out. I mean, the years are wrong too, but I could see why people would jump to it anyway, just in case. Yeah. But yes, this is a good one, I think, though, for people to guess.
All right, so Brian, it's time for our Zubmondo, and as a reminder, we are replacing the Zubmondo segment shortly. Because we're kind of running out of Zubmondo questions. But we wanted to give you guys a chance to ask questions. We haven't come up with a name for the segment yet, but we want you to send in any kind of questions you have for me and Brian to discuss on the show. And it doesn't have to be necessarily a question. It could just be like a discussion topic. Like, hey, I want to know what you guys thought about this. And it doesn't necessarily have to be horror related because, as you know, our Zubmondos tend to go off topic. So you can ask personal questions. You can ask questions about movies. You can ask questions about pop culture. You can toss out a discussion point. Who would beat up who? Whatever you want to talk about, and we will discuss it on the show. But for now, what is our Zubmondo?
And sorry if that bang you heard. I was trying to grab the book and I slammed my chair into the desk, so I apologize. Anyway, so here's one for you, Tim. Would you rather, and I think I know your answer, but this will be a fun one to discuss. So it says, would you rather be stranded on an island for 2 years with 20 friends of your choice or with a group of 20 famous people of your choosing?
At the risk of alienating my friends.
Really? Wow. See, I thought you'd go to that in a heartbeat.
I don't know. But 20 famous people of your choosing would be so fascinating because some of the people you could get that you would never have that opportunity again. I mean, you can always see your friends, but when's the next time you're going to be able to hang out with 20 celebrities of your choosing?
But what if it was like one of them of your choosing, though? That's true. But what if I know this doesn't say this in the rule, but what if one of the pick you swapped out and Edward Furlong took his place?
Okay, now, that would definitely be the opposite choice then. But, then there's also the case, you don't know these celebrities. They could be real a-holes in real life, They could be really hard to get
Right, and
along
think
with.
about it. They could be making movies, and now they're stranded with you on an island. So how happy could they be?
Yeah, although one of them would have to be Joe Bob, I think. Joe Bob would be cool to
that
hang
might
out
be
on an
fun
island with, I think.
Yeah, well, he has enough stories to last 2 years.
Yeah.
At least. You wouldn't even need the other
And
19.
if you're on a desert island, you had no access to movies, he could just tell you the movie.
Yeah. Can you imagine that? He'd be like, Scene 1, The Exorcist. You know? Yeah. It'd be
By
great.
the way, it would be 5 hours later, and he's like, by the way.
Yeah. And then he'd have to go like, back to the island. Yeah. And then go on really again before he did.
It would be The Exorcist, but every scene he would have like 20 pieces of trivia for it. So yeah, I don't know.
So it's the trivia in this is not even that good. So we'll skip that. Even the little things they write down. That's not even makes sense. So
I don't know. That one's very tough for me. I thought that would be an easy one, but I don't know.
I'd pick Friends just because I know those people. So
yeah, and then you think about it. That who's going to really help you survive? These people that don't know you, that are strangers, or your friends. I mean, your friends, your chances of survival are probably quite a bit higher with your good friends. So I think
right.
Intellectually, I'm fascinated by the thought of hanging out with 20 different celebrities. But I think my heart has to go with the friends. So yeah.
I'm with you.
All right. All right, guys. So we will be back here next week. I think we have another great surprise for you.
Yes.
We have a fantastic interview that we're going to release as a bonus episode, and I'm not quite sure yet when that's going to drop. I'm hoping sometime next week. So look for that in your feed. Make sure you subscribe to the feed so you get these episodes automatically. And
yes,
and continue to tweet at us and Facebook us and Instagram us and drop us a line at our civilgorepodcast@gmail.com email address. Again, get in those listener questions and discussion topics so we can start incorporating those in, and we'll read your stuff on the air. And again, thank you for listening and being loyal.
Yes.
We have loyal fans, Brian, very loyal fans.
We do.
And we have the kind of fans that when you miss an episode or you're late on an episode, they're immediately like, "Where's my episode?" And I love that.
I
love
know,
that because
seriously.
It shows that you're loved if you're not there and they are coming to check on you. That's the kind of friends you want to have.
Agreed.
The ones that if you don't show up for work, they're like knocking on your door, going, "Where are you?"
Yeah,
making sure you're not dead and getting eaten by your cats.
Exactly.
We have friends that wouldn't let us get eaten by cats. All right, guys. So we will see you back here next week.